When I ask you what comes to mind when I say ugly Class 1 railroad locomotives, is it questionably placed logos, horribly aged paint, half-assed patch jobs, mismatched loco parts that mess with the look of the locomotive that's distracting from a visual standpoint? Or if you're those people, CSX heritage units, since I know people hate those. What I consider among these is a series of locomotives on CN's roster, which at the time of recording have been on the roster for almost 3 years. And why are they considered ugly? Well, this is what we're going to talk about today. Starting in late 2017, CN would begin leasing various locomotives to aid in the rise in freight traffic, and as a temporary fill-in for motive power until the arrival of Jiva. This resulted in a welcome splash of color to the roster, with many worn out and trashy locomotives riding the rails for the last time, some of which being permanent additions to the roster later on. While the mainline trains received the most attention, the local power pool wasn't ignored, as CN was leasing various GP38-2s from the GMTX Rail Corporation to fill in a power shortage in Southern Ontario when it came to its 4-axle fleet, since many units were being relocated or retired around that time. They were among the few locomotives to survive on CN's roster, even after many units were returned back to their respective leasing companies. Finally, on January 22, 2022, Canadian National would purchase 13 of the blue Jeeps to add to their roster, with many extra units being returned back to GMTX. These blue EMDs were primarily located to eastern Canada. From the fields of southern Ontario to the shores of Halifax, they became the remaining splash of color on the roster, at the cost of one thing. When acquired, the 13 units were renumbered to 4900 through 4912, which was a preoccupied slot by another set of GP38-2s from the Grand Trunk Western. But these particular 13 locomotives were acquired by Canadian National rather than absorbed from another railroad. Numbering aside, the big elephant in the room was, well, the obvious answer. The patch jobs. There is no denying how horrendous some of these were, which is thanks in part due to how ugly, unappealing, and downright lazy they look, which has resulted in them being despised by local rail fans, often being nicknamed blue shitboxes or pride of Mac Yard. Now, I understand this was done to get these locomotives into service in any manner they could, but it's been close to 3 years at this point, and none of them have yet to receive a repaint. At all. Then again, there are still fallen flag locomotives that have been patched over, still wearing their original colors, decades after their original company was absorbed, so it's nothing new really. In terms of the patch jobs, they generally tend to go from bad to just no. From spray painted logos to simple coverings of the original logos, with the GMTX being altered in some cases to showcase CN in some instances, rather than just spray painting the logo on top. In some instances, the GMTX logo isn't even patched over on some units, which is admittedly kind of funny. The only passable one of the bunch was 4902, which had a more appealing patch job compared to every other shitbox, since it has an actual CN logo applied on multiple areas, and did a more presentable job on making it look more natural compared to the others we've seen. I'd say the worst ones of the group are 4906 and 4907, which are... You know what, I'm not even going to explain why they suck, these are self-explanatory. There is one positive I like about these locomotives, and it's not the GMTX colors and obviously not the patch jobs. It's actually the routes of these locomotives, which is quite varied for a group of 13. The following origins go as follows. 4900, 01, 04, and 05 were originally built for a DT&I and later absorbed by the Grand Trunk Western. 4902 and 03 were built straight for the GTW. 4906, 07, and 08 started life as passenger engines for a Long Island Railroad, with all 3 of them supporting bicentennial colors at one point, with 4908 still wearing its original spec work, and even made a brief appearance in the Muppets in Manhattan. 4909 4909, 10, and 11 started off under Penn's central ownership, were later absorbed by Conrail 76, then later sold to EMDX before falling under hands of the UP. 4912, on the other hand, is a different case, being a GP40 originally built for the Seaboard coastline, then falling under the hands of the Seaboard, which then later became CSX. So quite a varied roster in some cases, but saying that doesn't mean they're automatically better. And it isn't the end as well, as recently, CN had actually bought more GP38s from HLCX, and have been renumbered into the 4950 series. We don't know how many are supposed to be bought, but I'm guessing it's going to be a few more. And there is word going around that this could result in retirement of various GP9s, most of which are in their mid-60s, with the oldest one nearing 70 years of service. So while it is sad to see these go, time is inevitable and things get replaced over time, regardless of how we feel. Although I understand why these are frowned upon. It is worth noting that Canadian National has their own fleet of standard cab GP38s. You think they'd be better in terms of paint jobs, right? Well, no. Between November 1972 and January 1973, Canadian National would take delivery of 60 GP38-2s from General Motors, originally being numbered in the 5500 series and used on mainline freight trains throughout the 70s and 80s. However, half the fleet was later renumbered to the 4700s to make way for the SE60Fs, while the other half would be converted to Mother Slug units and renumbered to the 7500s. And over time, the paint jobs slowly began to rot away due to the constant running in, with some looking worse than others. Like the GMTXs, these units are nowadays located in Eastern Canada, which also may result of how they look now. For example, Montreal's located units had AC boxes fitted on the engineer side, and the rather infamous Equirail E-bells. The one thing I find funny with these locomotives is that there is no consistency with any of these liveries. Whether it's a repaint to the number boards, the bells, the small parts, hell, even the zebra painted units are generally inconsistent due to how faded the paint jobs are. Like, the variety is all over the place. That's actually kind of funny. And it isn't just exclusive to the 4700s, but even the 7500s are not free from its variety. Does this make them interesting? Well, admittedly, yes. Although it comes at the cost of some of these looking generally not appealing. Especially 4726. I'm sorry, like, what the fuck? To close things off, the standard cab GP38s are among the ugliest locomotives on CN's roster, and definitely among the ugliest on a Class 1 railroad. Do I think there are worse? Well, yeah, but I genuinely believe these are among the same level, thanks in part due to the hideous patch jobs, the inconsistent appearances, and just whatever this is. But I will say this, regardless of how hideous they look, at least they're still serving a purpose on Canadian National, hauling freight across eastern Canada, continuing to serve Canada's economy with delivering goods for our everyday lives. And that's something we can't deny.